Hey, this is Nate Wells.
And this is Drew Cove.
Check out our podcast, that Go for Hockey podcast, for the latest news and updates on University of Minnesota hockey. You can find us on iTunes, and we're also on the Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
That's elite.
The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
They may be drinkers, Robin, but they're also human beings.
Hell yeah, let's get stinko.
Studios in Minneapolis, Minnesota. This is the Giles and the Goalie podcast. I'm your host, Giles Farrell. Across from me is Ben Remington.
Hello.
And next to us producing our otherwise fine production is Tom Schreier.
An otherwise fine producer.
Yeah. On brand. We are recapping here episode 146. This is our regular season recap of the Minnesota Wild. It'll be more of a brief show, comparative to normal. Our big show will be the playoff episode, which you can find episode 147. We break down the Wild Jets with the help of Mirda Tesh, Winnipeg Athletic. Both podcasts going to get released at about the same time, so you can certainly find that if you're listening to this as well, because everyone is looking for hot playoff takes. But here in this show, we are recapping the Minnesota Wild regular season. But before we dive into the regular season recap, I believe we have a grinding of the gears by Ben Remington.
I'm not.
You told me before the show you had a rant.
Oh, no, it's not like a grinding of the gears kind of thing.
Oh.
I was just going to layer it on to, like, I'm not like, I just thought it was kind of funny.
We've had time to smooth it over.
Mm.
He came in here hot.
Yeah.
Sat down. We recorded an interview.
I was like,
he's like, I'm
what
good.
am I pissed about?
Yeah, he consulted with the ultimate yo apologist, Tom Schreier.
No, I mean, we can, I don't know, do we want to talk about that the way that finished, or I can just kind of jump right into it, I guess. It's kind of funny how, and I'll preface this. The first article I wrote for Zone Coverage was titled, I Was Wrong About Mike Yeo. And it was just kind of like, it was Boudreau had taken over the Wild, were high on the hog at that point. Obviously, they hadn't swooned yet, which they didn't swoon this season. I think that's something we'll obviously touch on, but it kind of like goes further into proving my point. We saw this out of the Blues. They absolutely crumbled at the end of the season. I think there was a tweet out there that they lost, like, I forget what it was, like
15 out of 25 and 5 out of 6.
5 out of 6.
They got smoked by some bad teams, too.
Yeah, and so it's just like, and it was just like, there it is right there. Like, there it is. That's the problem that the Wild had under Yeo. The Blues are having the exact same problem. And it's kind of brutal to like call out Yeo on this, but like it's mental toughness. Like it's the team following the personality of their coach, and like he obviously doesn't know how to push the right buttons on resetting a team's frame of mind, because as soon as a Mike Yeo team gets down, they're down. They are down hard, and it's taken them the acquisition of Deb.
I'm yelling timber.
This isn't even a Nate Wells podcast, but like it took them the acquisition of Devin Dubnyk to pull out of the swoon 3 years ago. It took him getting fired for them to pull out of the swoon 2 years ago.
It took a while to do that.
And so. Patient Tom.
Sorry.
And so it's just like, that's what he is as a coach. Like, he doesn't know how to navigate a team through hard times.
The way I see it is,
and
first,
so,
go ahead.
Yeah, and just to kind of finish it up, it's like there's all these people locally that love Mike Yeo with a passion, and I get a lot of them have met him personally, and he's a great guy, and I don't doubt that at all. I've never said anything foul about Mike Yeo as a human being. I think he's probably a wonderful guy, but it's like, that was my rant on Yeo. It's just like, yeah, this is who we thought he is who we thought he is.
And so a couple of things. It is interesting to see it in another location, right?
Yeah,
that it's not just here and it's not just the leadership. I think there's issues with that too. And we'll get into how the Wild don't have a star, and that's also a big issue, especially in the playoffs. But I think the interesting thing with Yo is Yo was gifted essentially two really highly paid star players when he was here, where the opposite happens in St. Louis, where they trade Shattenkirk, right? That was his team, and they traded Stastny this year.
Yeah.
So in some ways, it is working against him. It also... they've been in the playoffs 7 straight years, right? This is the first year they haven't made it in a while, and so expectations are different and all that. And at the end of the day, I always feel like the coach is the guy who's supposed to be able to stand outside the locker room, kind of let them feud a little bit, and kind of hash it all out, and then walk in and say, "Guys, you know." In Bruce's case, you guys effing want it, you know. But the outsider, almost like a consultant, because, and I think the problem is when you're that young, you can get swept up into it. And it seemed like Yo had the brains to be a coach, but not the emotions. And I keep on seeing this over and over again. If he can't be kind of the stabilizing force, the outsider, the whatever, I mean, that's trouble. That means maybe you go into an assistant role, or maybe you take a job at a different level, and then come back a little bit later, having 2 experiences under your belt, and try to use your brains to beat other teams in the NHL.
Right.
Yes.
That was my rant.
All right.
Grinding gears, baby.
Reviewing the final week of the 2017-2018 season for the Minnesota Wild. They opened on Monday. They had their regular season home finale against the Edmonton Oilers. The now high lottery picking again Edmonton Oilers.
What if they're going to win?
And they won 3-0. Minnesota did, I should say, at XL Energy Center. Like I said, home finale. Zach Parise, both goals. Joel Eriksson adding an empty netter. Devin Dubnyk making 22 saves in the shutout. Relatively lifeless effort, I thought, from the Edmonton Oilers. And the defense, first game, sans Ryan Suter, I thought was pretty decent, although it was against the Oilers, so take that, with a grain of salt. But, Carson Soucy, his first game in the NHL was recalled. Ryan Murphy, Nick Seeler, everyone. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't a first terrible outing from the defense. Then the Minnesota Wild took a road trip out to the West Coast, and they were kindly given back-to-back games on the West Coast. And if you're me, you work a regular day job, that is a brutal grind. First of which came Wednesday against the Anaheim Ducks. The Ducks are the winners 3-1. Matt Dumba scored the power play goal for Minnesota to get them on the board first, but 3 unanswered goals from the Ducks seal Minnesota's fate and help the Ducks boost their playoff position, as I think it was before this game the Wild had pretty much locked up.
They clinched already.
Yeah, they had locked up their spot. They weren't going anywhere. So it was just one of those games where you were just glad no one gets hurt.
Basically.
Then the next night, they were in Los Angeles. Big stars Zlatan Ibrahimovic attending the Kings game, as I'm sure you're both soccer aficionados like I am.
I had to ask you who he was. So
yeah. And then I explained why it's just more said Zlatan, because
he's
nobody wants to spell out Ibrahimovic.
Right.
He's the guy who on Twitter I think said LA is getting Zlatan or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like he has
announced
a bit,
his own.
Well, it was more like people are
person.
like, that he's important in his own mind. But he also sniped a goal right from like halfway across the pitch.
Yeah, it was incredible. His first goal.
So he's just kind of it'd be like if Brizgalov was really good as a forward in hockey. Kind of.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Hey, listen to the Zone Covers Soccer podcast.
Yep.
Quick plug. Wild and the Kings. Wild losing overtime 5-4 at Staples Center. Dustin Brown, the game winner in overtime. He had 4 goals for the Los Angeles Kings. Dustin Brown had 4 goals. Terrible. Setting the Minnesota Wild on fire. And as I point out on Twitter, if Dustin Brown gets an 82-game season and gets just the Minnesota Wild this year, he is also a Hart Trophy candidate.
Yeah, no kidding.
Ryan Murphy, Matt Dumba scored in back-to-back games.
Oh, yeah?
Eric Stahl, and a short-handed goal from Nate Bleepin Prosser to tie it.
You can count on that in the playoffs.
Snipe.
You can count on that in the playoffs.
I know. Good God.
Difference. Why didn't any of us say that he was the difference maker? Matt Dumba.
Here's what I'd love to ask Mikko Koivu what he thought when he turned on that rush and then he looks to pass it to the charging defenseman, and he sees Nate Prosser. I want to ask him, what did you think when you saw 39 there to throw it to?
I think he just saw the right colored jersey. Because if he would have known who he was passing it to, he might have just
probably would have
opted to
just
be like,
dumped it. He would,
you know what?
Because it's shorthanded, he just dumps it down.
I'm just going to get this one in deep and call it a day. You know, I think that was the situation.
And then to close out the regular season, the Minnesota Wild win 6-3 in the Shark Tank. I don't even know what they call it now. SAP Center at San Jose.
Yes.
Tom Sharks.
Yeah.
Wild win. And a poor effort from San Jose, who needed to win to have home ice advantage against the Ducks in round 1 of the playoffs. They do not. Jonas Brodin, Matt Cullen, Mikhail Granlund. And then Jason Zucker marks twice. And then Eric Stahl with his team record-tying 42nd goal of the season. Also worth noting, Jason Zucker scored 2 goals after his wife kind of called him out on Twitter. So maybe not called him out, but she's so an FSN pulled up a graphic that had Jason Zucker and Karl Anthony Towns, and they're highlighting like Minnesota sports. So she takes a photo of it, and then she puts a heart over Karl Anthony Towns of the Timberwolves, and she goes, "I love when Fox Sports North highlights my favorite player."
Yeah.
Yes.
Hashtag
Yes.
meow, and then it just took off.
Of course.
Yes.
She's-
That's a perfect thing to do on Twitter.
She's good at Twitter.
Yeah.
The Zuckers are good at Twitter.
She should literally have all the Wild players lined up. Heart, heart, heart. Oh, which one's missing? Heart, 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 heart. And he'll go off in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously the Jason Zucker 33 goals this year, and then we had Eric Stahl with his 42nd goal this season. And just to briefly reflect on this season that Eric Stahl had, 42 goals, tying Baron Gabrick's 07-08 team record for most goals in a season. I told somebody this earlier today. I never thought this record thought to be even tied or broken until the Wild draft high in the lottery and strike gold. And yet 33-year-old Eric Stahl just defied the odds and did that. And man, what a season, and you sure hope this carries into the playoffs, but we'll talk more about that in the playoff episode. But wow, what a season, and what a bargain that the Minnesota Wild struck with Eric Stahl.
I think a couple things. He thought he was dead in the water when he went to New York, right? He looked kind of just...
a lot of people did.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about this on the other podcast, but...
Yeah, but have you seen New York? They're also dead in the water, too.
Right. The other thing, too, is, and I mentioned this in the playoffs, but the playoff portion here, but that injury, I thought maybe he was just screwed. Like, that crosses your mind when you see a guy enter or go into the boards
like that.
Yeah,
that was bad. It was really bad.
And why I guess, yeah, I mean, I just think a guy built like that who, they didn't draft him, but you did get a guy who was, number 3 overall in his draft class?
2,
maybe?
He was 2nd overall. I think it was Malkin who went first.
So that's one way to get guys like that. And
No. That was the 03 draft, wasn't it?
Let's look this up. We all have
because Fleury went first in the 03 draft. Because the 03 draft is the one everyone fawns over as being the best ever.
And that's mostly because of Pavelski and guys like that in the late rounds. But regardless, that is a way to acquire skill. And maybe it's the lesson learned there is that a guy with his size, even if he has a few tough years, you can get someone there.
Obviously, Eric Stahl's not anywhere close to the Hart Trophy candidacy, as there are just so many other worthy candidates this year. But say this was a different year and you have, the one standout and then, you just have the couple throw-ins to kind of go with that clear-cut MVP favorite. I mean, in a different year, would Eric Stahl have been maybe that one of those throw-in players, or am I just thinking way too highly of his season?
For sure. Take away his 42 goals, and you have basically Zucker and Granlund. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of in a year that Niederreiter's hurt and Coyle.
It was the 06 draft, drafted behind one Eric Johnson.
That's Jordan Stahl.
Yeah, sorry, he's number 2 in 03. You're right.
Oh, 03. It was 03. Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of Stahls out there.
The 2017-18 Giles and the Goalie Minnesota Wild regular season recap podcast presented by the Stahl family.
Yes, the sod farm in Thunder Bay.
Come out to Thunder Bay.
There it is. Yeah, 2003. You're right.
Yeah.
What a season. Should he be extended on July 1st?
That's going to be the question of the offseason. I have no doubts.
I risk it.
Assuming the general manager returns.
Well, that's probably the first question you ask. And
Calm down, Tom.
I was revving up, baby.
I think that if Fletcher stays, he's more likely to get extended. If that makes sense, I don't know.
Fletcher wants to screw the next guy. You get Koivu and you get Stahl. Enjoy it.
But I think with, as always, I can't say yes, no with Eric Stahl with anything, with any contract. I can't. I'm not that guy at all where I have such strong feelings about one particular. It's all going to depend on the term and the AAV. Like that's 100%. I would love to sign Eric Stahl for another 2-year deal at $3.5 million. Like, good God, who wouldn't? Yeah, exactly. Do I want to see the Wild sign him at 5 years for $8 million a season? No, I don't. So there's got to be some middle ground in there somewhere. So that's where I'm at with Eric Stahl. I'm not going to say unequivocally, yes, absolutely, positively, 100% resign him. Because what if it's a deal that's awful? A deal that takes him until he's freaking 39 and he's making, Parisi Suter money. I don't want that.
I think you risk it, and then maybe look at if he has a career year again. You can probably sneak a 2-year deal, and you're probably paying a lot.
I think it's gonna be tough to get him to sign anything under 3 years after the season he had.
Yeah, I'd say
even
give
at his
him.
age.
I'd say give him the 3. Like if
he wants 3 years,
it seems to be
that.
evident that he does like it here and probably would prefer to stay here with the proximity to the Thunder
but
Bay.
But the money is the big thing,
right? And it's probably gonna take the general manager, whoever that may be, to just say, hey. Here, we'll give you a little bit more term, but you got to take a little bit less
like
of
Zucker,
money.
really,
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And we'll get to Zucker in a little bit, but you still have to take a little less money. And, especially if you want to keep winning, which
right.
also is big to him. And he probably sees Minnesota as a good chance to still win as they're in the playoffs year after year. And for somebody who spent, what was that? 11 seasons in Carolina, and you sniff the playoffs, twice or just 3 times?
And then you're pretty much awful after that.
09, they went to the East and then got swept by Pittsburgh. I think that's about it.
Okay.
Woof. But yeah, I mean, he obviously probably sees as also a good chance to win here still and have that shot. So I think there'll be common ground to be found there in the summer. But moving on, more news out of the week. We didn't know the extent of the injury when we recorded at Tin Whiskers last Saturday.
We knew it was bad.
But we knew not good news was happening. And sure enough, in typical Nate Wells fashion, 30 minutes after the podcast had ended, Michael Russo of The Athletic reporting the Wild feared Ryan Suter had broken his tibia, fractured his tibia. And that was later confirmed. And then also a little bone in the ankle. I forget what that was called. But he went on to have surgery to repair this after that play in the boards. And essentially it was described, as he described it, as almost having like a car accident. And
good God.
When you hear things like, if this was another sport, this probably ends it, the career. And, you hear he's not walking for 4 months at minimum. So we're pushing, the start of the regular season for Suter to be anywhere close to game action, but I think there has to be a real general concern with this injury and what we're hearing, but maybe there is no better player to recover from this than Ryan Suter.
It seemed odd that he was the one who got hurt, right? They talked about he said that if he was playing another sport, it could mean the end of his career. It also just seemed like that guy, he's missed, 2 games or something like that.
His whole, yeah.
And one of them was that suspension related?
Suspended, yeah.
So, I mean, in my mind, I think he'll be fine coming back, but he does seem like a guy that, like kind of almost superhuman in terms of he thought he'd play until he's 40. He thought that he could kind of shake off any injury. And he is literally country strong in the sense that, at least reporting tells us that he's out in his farm in the off season throwing around hay or whatever the hell Ryan Suter does. But that guy he's built. So I think he'll come back fine. But it is odd that an injury like this would happen to a player like that.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
The other news kind of out of the week, Louis Belpedio was signed to his entry-level contract finally and was brought to Minnesota to burn a year of his entry-level contract, as reported by Michael Russo of The Athletic.
And not read by Giles and myself, and Declan.
Not read by the Giles and the Goalie podcast.
And subsequently bitch slapped on Twitter for not reading said writings from Michael Russo.
I didn't even know how to reply to that. So
You
I
can't.
I
You're
just
just kinda
came back
like,
with, well,
sorry, man.
this is embarrassing.
Yeah, whoops. Our bad.
But it's a rite of passage for everyone, so I guess it was our turn.
Yeah, true.
And Louis Belpedio did not play until the San Jose game, in which he tallied 2 assists in his NHL debut. I wrote an article on him last week on Zone Coverage, kind of highlighting his first few games in Iowa. Obviously, it was a little rough start, and in the article, even he said, it's a little tough transition to go right from college to, pro hockey, but. For the Wild's sake, you hope he can, but it doesn't sound like he's going to get into a playoff game really quick. So Carson Soucy was sent back to Iowa and will probably be recalled Monday for the playoffs. But it did sound like he wasn't going to sign unless he signed and was brought to Minnesota to burn that first year of his entry-level deal.
Yeah, he had leverage because he could have been a free agent come August. He could have done the Mike Riley thing, right? Because it had been so long since he had left school,
right?
Or since he had signed, was drafted, and since he left school. So, he had leverage, so he used it, and he burned that year, which certainly isn't a positive thing. But I think I don't know. It could be worse. It's not like he's the kind of guy where it's like, oh, he's really going to take the Wild over the coals, over this whole. The next time his negotiations come up. So I'm not too worried about it. It was just I didn't know that he had that kind of leverage, so that's why I was surprised that they would burn a year or so. But that obviously, as Michael reported and we didn't read, that's just kind of what the situation was. So it was understandable.
So that was kind of the big news of the week. Was there anything else from the week that kind of grabbed your attention? Or
I think the only reason why the Edmonton game matters is that if you lose that and then go to the West Coast, have to play back-to-back games, you could really spiral heading into the playoffs.
Yeah.
And this way, they did not look good against LA or Anaheim, which is relevant. It matters. But at least you go into the playoffs with this big win over San Jose that had something pretty serious at stake in a series that could go 7 games that now they can't play at home. So I think that's all that matters there.
It would have been interesting to see the dynamic of the road trip if they had lost to Edmonton. Because at that point, the third spot wasn't clinched yet. The Wild had to win that to clinch, and then they did. And so I guess I just took the road trip as, they were just, guys weren't overly going out of their way to block shots or, make that extra hit or whatnot. They're just trying to put forth a decent effort, but, hey, we're looking at the playoffs because we got nothing else to play for. And,
right.
They made a great comeback against Los Angeles, but, man, just getting roasted by Dustin Brown really sticks in your craw.
Yeah.
Grinds your gears, what do you say?
That should have been my grinding gears. But to recap the regular season, the Minnesota Wild finished with a record of 45, 26, and 11, 101 points. The 4th time in franchise history the Minnesota Wild have eclipsed 100 points. They did so last year at 106 points, which obviously a franchise record. They did that 2014-15 when they had the incredible Devin Dubnyk run after he was acquired. And then the first time they did it was 2006-07. They had 104 points, in which they got summarily waxed by the Anaheim Ducks in the first round of the playoffs, as we all fondly remember.
Yeah.
But that was their regular season. They finish with 11th in the league in goals for, 11th in goals against. Team leaders in terms of stats, just from a quick perspective, is obviously Eric Stahl, 76 points, 42 goals, both leading the team. Kel Granlund, 67 points, Zucker, 64 points. Ryan Suter tied a career mark before leaving the game with injury. Would have obviously broken that mark, no doubt, but he had 51 points this year. And then rounding out the top 5 of the points leaderboard on the Minnesota Wild with 50 points at the age of 23 is Matt Dumba.
I thought he wasn't good.
It's almost like there was these couple of guys, and there's more than a few of us, but said that he was pretty good and that he was only going to get better. It's almost like someone might have declared this some period of time of a certain player.
Who has 2 thumbs and declared it the year of Dumba? This guy.
Yeah.
Devin Dubnyk on the season, 35, 16, and 7, 252 goals against, 918 save percentage, 5 shutouts. Alex Stalock, 10, 10, and 4, 285 goals against, 910 save percentage, 1 shutout. Somebody did point out in the 28 games Alex Stalock played this year, the Wild went 10 and 18, which was a fascinating thing, which I'm sure Ben can spend a lot of time telling us about how bad former Bulldog Alex Stalock is, but...
Not like in an excited manner. Like, I don't wish ill of Alex Stalock or Bulldog fans, but it's like there was so many people early in the season that were like, Dubnyk's terrible. You got to get Stalock in there. And there may or may not have been some local broadcaster that was quaffing Stalock's sack the whole time, saying that he should be some kind of starter. And it's just like, and it's just like, Stalock is fine, and he had a good start to the season, and that's wonderful. But let's not like pretend that he's like an NHL starting caliber goalie. I looked it up in the second half of the season. Guess what his save percentage was? It was .887.
So they're getting someone new next year, you think?
I wouldn't say that for sure, because I think he ended up the season with a 910 save percentage. That's
he was good
below
enough to,
average, but it's backup quality. It's just like I wouldn't be surprised if they did. Let's put it this way: they don't have to, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if they did.
He is under contract next year.
Yeah, so that's what would keep him
and he's
around.
good enough to spell Dubnyk, who is the surefire starter.
Yes.
So I mean, that's something.
Yeah,
Debatable. Wow.
God, that was amazing.
So I guess before we revisit our over-unders, just general thoughts on the regular season now that we're done with it. And I'd give you guys a minute to kind of maybe think about it, but my thought was, really this week, my whole thinking of the season as a whole was there were no swoons.
Yes, huge.
As defined by the Ben Remington swoon guidebook,
Which is actually on zone coverage, right?
Yeah.
You wrote,
Absolutely.
yeah.
The
Naming
St. Louis Blues can add a passage to this guidebook now, but and just to me, from somebody who tries to cover the team objectively, the not extreme ups and downs that this team had was, I don't want to say almost more of a relief, but it was kind of a relief. Like, the season didn't take a terrible toll on me like others had. Like
Giles did take a month off of drinking. We should point that out. We should point that out.
It allowed me to try a dry month.
Giles swooned. Giles swooned.
Giles had his own personal swoon.
Somebody actually DM'd me and was like, "How'd your dry month go?" It's like,
I'm drinking again. That's all you need to know.
That's all it is.
It's being a Wild fan these last 5 years, as everyone can no doubt, it has been challenging, and the swoons really play into that. And and as we said this year, this team is going to be defined in the playoffs. So I don't have any big takeaways from the regular season except they made the playoffs.
Yeah.
They got in, and now it's time to do what they need to do in the playoffs, because that's what we set at this season. And you still got to get the job done no matter who's out of the lineup.
Yeah.
I'll go this direction. So they are selling out games, right? And not only selling out, but getting to the 19,000 number, which means you have standing room.
Yeah. They have a wait list.
Right. They point that at the warming house. And at the same time, I'm not getting emails from them constantly saying, we broke this ratings record, we broke this ratings record, we broke, right?
Right.
The impression I get here is that it was drubbed in from their brilliant broadcast that this was a good home team, which they were. I think generally speaking, it's still yes, Giles?
Did you guys know the Minnesota Wild are a great home team?
I just learned that recently. They should have said it more. But in terms of a product of should I buy tickets, you're going to have a fun time as a hockey fan. Like they will probably win the game, and there will be a lot of people surrounding you. It's fair to comment on this, but let me just go this direction first.
Sure.
At what point, and I think of this as someone who followed the first Flip Wolves, right, which were constantly first round and out until the final year, right, where before Flip was fired. But
Spree and
at what point, and they had a similar deal. They got 19,000 in there. It was a fun event for a while. At what point do people get discouraged with Chicago was in our way, Winnipeg's going to get in their way, the stupid Blues thing?
Nashville,
Just the fact that this team, I don't think, as currently constructed, will ever get out of the second round. Maybe not even the first. And at what point does that eat into attendance, even if you go to the game knowing you'll win, that it's usually a packed house, that West 7th is super fun on Wild games?
Yeah.
I mean, at what point does just the ceiling that I think is becoming very obvious, is it you miss the playoffs? Or is it just a constant first round
I think
out?
that the shelf life on that is the same as the shelf life on the team itself. Because I think by the time that people get really, truly sick of this team's lack of playoff success, to the point of avoiding regular season games, as you're saying, which aren't entertaining in whatever experience for most people, I think by that time you've got a team that probably isn't winning much anymore. Like,
But
it would
you still
take
have
like
Parisi and Suter under contract, probably.
Oh yeah, no, that's definitely going to happen.
Yeah.
They're going to be a bad team with Parisi and Suter under contract. It's
And-
not going to be very long.
And I guess if you buy into this, which I think is true, that forwards are great from 21 to 29, you still might have some decent years left in Granlund, if they're still around Granlund's or whatever.
Yep.
I mean, they have a big window to be a playoff team. I just don't know if they're ever going to get to that next level where you truly see them as a contender.
Well, and as we'll discuss on our playoff show with Murat, you need stars in the league to win.
And they don't have them.
They don't have a bona fide star like the high echelon teams do.
No.
But
Weirdly, the one guy who could be?
yeah, I
You
was
know-
going to say, they have a guy just sitting over in Russia, just...
Well, the other direction I was going in is Dumba, maybe. But that's
I don't know
but the
that
fan
he's an
base won't
Eric
buy
Carl-
it.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
He's not an Eric Carlson and
Or Burns.
or Burns, which is don't me start on that whole comparison. But he could be, but nobody would care because it'd be like, oh well, yeah, that one time he lost.
And the other
puck.
guy's trapped in Russia. You may not get him.
Yep.
So
Also hard to evaluate because he's playing in the KHL.
Well, and that I mean, we've all read on that situation is such a joke as far as actual competitive hockey goes. Like, it's really tough to measure anything. Like, it's not even apples to oranges. It's apples to
my point,
frickin' dragon fruit or something absurd.
apples to poutine.
Laxa Star can really get crapped on the road.
Yeah.
Don't really play a full 60-minute game, even at home.
No.
And I think there's a playoff barrier. And so I guess my point is, as a whole, is the season, it's fine. Right?
Yeah.
I went to maybe 2 games. I think you guys went to a couple games.
Yeah, 2, I think.
Yeah. It was fine. I didn't feel a need to go to 10. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. There's nights when the Wolves and the Wild are playing, and again, I'm probably the minority here, but I'm like, I kind of know what's going to happen with the Wild. The Wolves are kind of interesting now, you know? I mean, there's some of that too.
They're a lot more manic.
Right. I mean, Tiz might strangle someone, you know, like whatever. I don't know. But no, I mean, they're just, the Wolves are new and upcoming, and the Wild are a very predictable team at this point.
Yeah, I think so.
Any blazing takes on the regular season?
Yeah, I think I liked your point about them not swooning. I think that was important, and we said it. All off season we talked about. Well, it doesn't matter what this team does play in the regular season. It all matters what they do in the playoffs. And now it's that time. So now it's like, people, because it was during the regular season. What else do you have to do? You're going to focus on what they're doing at that current time, but it doesn't matter. I mean, unless they win a series against Winnipeg, the season doesn't really matter. Like, that's not going to be viewed as any kind of fun at all. It's not going to be viewed as a successful season at all. So that's 100% it. I think it was interesting that they didn't swoon, and I think it was interesting that this was a 101-point team that never really felt that good. Like, it never really felt like it was a good, like, because you think 100 points, that's an echelon in the NHL. That's a
Yeah, not only that, but objectively bad against like Colorado.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean. There were some of those weird
that's
games.
What taints it is because they had games where they dominated. They had games where they mopped the floor with teams.
Yeah,
but they played so down to competition. It was just like and I wrote about it a couple of months ago. You can't trust this team. Like, you have no idea. Like, you do know it is predictable to a point, But at the same time, like, it's predictable to a point where it's like, they're going to play poorly against bad teams. And that's just not what good cup contending teams do. Like, that's not a recipe for success.
So it is weird. And again, I just don't like the matchup they have against Winnipeg.
Oh, yeah.
But the funny thing about this is we're terrible in the overtime, which doesn't matter, right? I mean, they were bad. And then we're bad against bad teams, which doesn't matter in the playoffs.
Right.
And the funny thing is that doesn't matter when you can't play against a team which I don't think they can play against a team like Winnipeg.
Yeah.
And goodness, it's a funny... Like, it's weird in the most unpredictable sport that you know what you're getting with the Wild. And usually you'd say, oh, yeah, a team that does well in the regular season, not bad. Well, it doesn't matter if you're
it doesn't.
If you're a second-round playoff team or first round at this point.
No, and I think, I mean, them running into Winnipeg and Winnipeg suddenly becoming good. We knew this was coming. We've seen Winnipeg have top flight prospects in the pipeline for a while now.
What's funny?
And now they're here, and it's like, well,
they're the Canadian team that got all the picks, right? But Edmonton drafted better and still was worse. Like, give Winnipeg some credit.
Oh, yeah.
That in a very tough division, they're kind of figuring it out.
They weren't run by Peter Chiarelli, is what you're saying?
Edmonton had a lot of good draft picks, but they squandered them.
That nail guy? What's his name?
Yeah.
Yakupov.
So, all right.
He's so good he ended up in Mike Yo's doghouse. There's been good players that have ended up in Mike Yo's doghouse, but it's like, yeah.
We'll call that the
Not
Jason
first overall.
Zucker Memorial
Not first overall picks necessarily.
So at the beginning of the season, Tom Schreier, Heather Rule, Ben, myself, we did our season preview show in which we did some over-unders, which we checked in on about halfway through the year, and now that we're at the end of the year, we are going to check back in and see who won. Last year, Ben just absolutely mopped the floor with me, so I've been looking for vengeance this year.
Giles Revenge Tour 2018.
Yep. So the first one we had, obviously, was Minnesota Wild wins. We set it at 47.5.
That was probably lofty.
If you go back to the beginning of the year, Bovada had their odds. They had Minnesota Wild at 43.5.
Yeah.
The Minnesota Wild finishing with 45 wins. So at our over-under that we set at 47.5, Heather took the under, and then Tom, Ben, and myself all took the over.
Right.
So Heather was the only one to accurately predict that. And when we checked in on this mid-season, Heather was...
She was murdering us.
Yeah. It was very, very... The score was very in her favor. Mm-hmm. So I will say that as we dive into this here. So at points, we set it at 106.5. Bovada had the Wild at 96.5. The Minnesota Wild finished 101 points. Again... Heather takes the under. Tom also takes the under. And Ben and myself went over, as I believe we both predicted the Minnesota Wild to win the Central Division.
I think I said something to the effect, yeah.
Yeah, I know I did.
I was bullish.
Everybody laughs at me now. But
I was young and foolish.
So there you go. There's another point for Heather, and Tom gets on the board with a point. Mikhail Granlund points, we set the over-under at 63.5 points, thinking he'd have a little bit of regression after his 69 next year. Mm-hmm. And he finished the year with 67 points.
It wasn't as nice of a season.
Boo.
It might have been if he had not been hurt.
That's a good point.
All four of us took the over and are rewarded with a point.
Woo.
Giles and Ben finally getting on the board.
Yep.
Jason Zucker goals set the over-under at 24.5 after he had 22 last season. Jason Zucker finished, as we said, 33 goals this season, clearly hitting the over.
Right.
Ben took the under. Tom took the under. Heather took the under. Giles took the over. Yes! So Giles now on the board. Or no, Giles with a second point.
Mm-hmm.
Devin Dubnyk, games played, we set the over-under at 61.5. Devin Dubnyk finished with 60 games played this season.
Unreal.
Ben, Tom, and Heather went over. Giles took the under, getting another point.
If he wasn't hurt in December...
Right.
Yeah, it would have cleared the over.
Oh, easily.
I had faith that Bruce would play Stalock more.
Faith in Stalock,
Yeah.
which was, I don't know, not misplaced, but turned out kind of half and half.
As proclaimed at the beginning of the year, Matt Dumba points, 38.5, proclaiming it the year of Dumba.
Yes.
I and Ben took the over, Tom as well. Heather took the under. Matt Dumba finished with 50 points.
Woo!
So
I predicted that number exactly, actually, on the Hockey Wilderness podcast.
You did.
I said 50 points.
I think I predicted that the Minnesota Wild would, or no, Matt Dumba would lead the Minnesota Wild defenseman in points.
He actually didn't.
Missed by one. I wish it was under better circumstances.
Not like this.
Yeah. So
Not like this.
whoo. We have Joel Eriksson-Ek points. We set the over-under at 35.5.
This is comical now.
Because at the beginning of the year, he was like slated to be on like the third line. So you think, he'd have decent.
Get some time
he
with-
was weighed down a little bit.
Right. And this is before we knew Parisi was hurt as well, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Ben, Tom, and Heather took the under. Giles took the over. Joel Eriksson-Ek finished with 16 points.
Did you know?
So,
Did you know?
God damn it.
Did you know?
Yes, we are aware. So at this point in the standings, everyone is tied with 4. So everyone is even right now. There is no clear-cut favorite as we get into our last 2 categories.
No,
First of which is...
I think I only have 3 at this point. Because the last one I win as well. Yeah,
So you went under 2.
Yeah.
No, you have 4. I counted out. Anyway, whatever. It's all tied.
Okay.
Luke Cunnin games, we set the over-under at 32.5. And he finished the season with 19 games. Obviously, he probably would have cleared that had he not.
How many games
ACL.
were left when he missed?
It was early in the season. I don't know. Or not early, but I mean,
it was.
he had a lot of games
It was
left.
beginning in March when he went down.
So it would have been real close.
It would have been right on that line.
It would have been right on the nuts if he would have torn his ACL.
Ben went over, Tom went over, Heather went over, Giles went over.
Yep.
So nobody gets
all
points there. And then it all comes down to this. The ultimate granddaddy question of them all. Will the Minnesota Wild swoon this season? We set the over-under at swoons this season at 0.5. Tom and Heather took the over. Giles took the under.
Yep, I took the under.
So I did miscount you at one point. It was
when you said we were all tied at 4, I only had 3 actually at that point.
okay.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, because the points end of the season, that was the difference.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah,
because we
2
said
questions
no
ago,
and they
Ben,
said yes.
Ben had 3.
Yeah,
The rest of us had 4.
right.
So with that question, Giles wins.
Yes.
Revenge tour is a go.
So you beat us by 2 Dubnyk starts, basically, or 2 Dubnyk games.
That's amazing. And yeah,
That's what it came down to.
Yep.
2 Dubnyk games.
Yep.
And
and Dumba's points were close, right?
No,
I
was way over on that.
took
Okay.
the over.
Never mind.
Yeah, so that was the one that really decided it was the Dubnyk games.
That's so funny. Which of all things?
Yeah.
Like, great.
So the final tally, Giles finished with 5. Tom, Heather, and Ben had 4. Very closely contested, over under.
So close.
But
It's interesting to see how close we were, like how right we were about some things and how horribly wrong we were about other things.
yeah, like my Eastern Conference predictions were not terrible. And then I looked at the West, and somebody who followed me was kind enough to point this out when I retweeted the article, but they were like, yeah, just read what you put here on the Golden Knights. And I said, well,
in Chicago, no one thought Chicago would just disappear, right?
Well, and everyone thought Edmonton was on the upswing, too,
Right.
because they made the playoffs last year.
That's
and,
what you-
you just saw Connor McDavid was so good.
He was so good.
And then it's just like, and this, I'm not going to get into an MVP discussion, but it was just like the rest of the team is so bad they were able to like concrete boots
This
him into
is
the ocean.
what you get when you go orange jerseys, all right?
That's exactly right.
But at the beginning of the year, like I think I even put that in that article I wrote, that I don't buy Edmonton as like a Stanley Cup contender, but I think they'll probably be a playoff team still. And
That's what
like,
I would
everyone
say, too.
was
Yeah.
everyone was like picking Edmonton to like win the Stanley Cup. Like,
it's like,
what is this? Like they gave away one of their better forwards, and they're still questionable on defense. And like, are you gonna rest Cam Talbot ever? Like, so everything that we just pointed out there came to fruition this season, and they missed the playoffs.
Weird.
So
Imagine that.
I don't know. But anyway, yeah, so those were our over-unders. Anything else we want to, I guess we kind of want to hit on there? Like,
We got a lot of playoff stuff.
Clearly, yeah. I mean, I guess clearly the other thing I kind of took away from that was both over-unders we set for pending RFAs, Jason Zucker and Matt Dumba, were clearly shattered on the over side.
Destroyed. It cost the Wild a lot of money.
Flush with cash.
Yeah, that'll be. I mean, we will certainly have lots of off-season to get to that. I'm sure we'll get to shortly, but spoiler alert.
Get wrecked.
Spoiler alert. But yeah, that'll be an interesting thing this offseason. There's a lot of questions, much more than last season where there wasn't really much for them to do at all. There was the expansion draft, and everyone thought they knew how that was going to go, and it kind of changed. But the team really couldn't do much. Whereas this year, it's just like you've got the Stahl question. First off, you've got the Chuck Fletcher question. You got the Stahl question, then you got the Dumba and the Zucker, and it's like there's lots of very pivotal decisions to make there. So the Wild are not at a crossroads, because without any one of those players, this team isn't drastically different. But it's still it's gonna be a very important offseason for this team. It's this very small window they have.
Stahl ends up in Winnipeg and Zucker in Vegas, and you're just like, what did you guys do?
It's entirely possible.
Yes.
All right. Moving on to the final Bruce Boudreau quote of the regular season.
Hi, this is Bruce Boudreau. I don't see how in Toronto that they're calling it, unless it's a guy they just pulled in off the street that hasn't seen hockey before. If I were the fans, I'd be booing even more, because that, they pay good money for this.
If you want it, don't just think you want it. Go out and f***ing want it.
The Bruce Boudreau quote of the week comes in the wake of the final regular season game Minnesota Wild play in San Jose. Boudreau again hitting the 100-point mark. I actually trying to look it up here. He don't think he has ever had a season that's not a lockout year where he hasn't hit 100 points.
The only time that he hadn't was the year he got fired and went to the Ducks. So literally every full season he's coached, he's been over 100 points. I mean, that's a ridiculous record.
Just getting there. Obviously, the 101 is the lowest outside of that year. Yeah.
He's also done it in I know Chicago had a down year in a tougher division. The Anaheim Sharks and Kings could always beat up on the Canadian teams.
Yeah.
Yeah, the quote of the week comes after the Wild won in San Jose to get over the 100-point mark. And he said, I've asked if there was really any meaning to that for him. And he says, it means we make the playoffs a lot. Now we have to go far.
This goes back to something you wrote. We should almost republish this on Zone Coverage because it's still relevant.
Not at Wild Extra isn't around anymore, so it'd be tough to find, I think.
Yeah. Or maybe you should just write it again. But you basically said Boudreau and the Wild's fate are tied. It's no more, it's incredibly relevant now.
Yeah.
Because, he's able to win in the regular season. It's a fun product. At the same time, we'll get to the preview soon here.
I think that's it's it's especially right now, like this season. Maybe this is when the window starts to close. It's like, is Bruce Boudreau a coach worthy of being like? He just got to 500 wins faster than anybody not named Scotty Bowman. Like, that's huge, but at the end of the day, like, he's never done anything in the playoffs worth note. He's never even coached in the Stanley Cup final. And the Wild, to my point in the article, was the Wild are kind of at a crossroads where it's like, they signed a Preseason Suitor, that's great. They've had a team that's kind of, punching Judy in the playoffs for a couple of years now. That's great. But when are they going to do something else? And then that's it's very parallel tracks.
If they lose this year, I will say this. I think it's more roster construction, unless he does just get out coached. But it would be more roster construction.
Yeah, but at some point you have to be responsible for developing your players too. And I think he's done a good job with that. I mean, he's done a good job. Zucker's come a long way.
Granlund had a good night.
Dumblin, Granlund, they've come a long way.
I think a healthy Niederreiter would have been good too. So.
But yeah, it's just like he also hasn't turned anybody into a superstar either. And maybe they just don't have enough talent for that. Maybe that's, to your point, more of roster construction. But it's like he hasn't turned, Nino into the superstar that maybe some people think he can be. He hasn't turned Granlund into the 80, 90 point juggernaut.
Charlie Coyle still disappears.
Charlie Coyle is, if he has a 70-point season, we think a lot differently about this team probably. That's just kind of where we're at.
I would agree.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right.
What's your bet, sir?
Ah, yes, the bet. Okay, what the hell? It makes very little sense to bet when you cannot win.
Do we find out tomorrow night if the Wolves make the playoffs or not, correct?
Yeah. So, into the weekly wager segment. Obviously, the almighty wager of the season is going to come to a conclusion, and the Wolves are trying to...
Oh, they're without Jimmy
trying.
Butler, they almost pulled it off, or they're close to pulling it off.
Tibbs is really trying to nosedive this team right into a bowl of soup. But do we want to wager on something this week, or do we just want to let the Wolves kind of?
I think the Wolves one is probably big enough to where we can.
Do you want to double down on it? I got a Wolves themed wager if you guys want it.
Wolves? What do you mean?
What seed? Are they in the 7 or 8, or are they
9
higher? Higher or lower? Do you want to do that? One of you guys choose 7, 8. One of you guys choose other.
Well, that depends entirely on what other teams do, right? So that they can't control it at all.
The Wolves do though. They play Denver, which they could eliminate Denver. They play Memphis. They should beat Memphis.
Well,
they did not.
I know. Last time,
and they've lost to Memphis twice. Yeah, not great.
Without Jimmy though, but
yeah, Jimmy's back.
When are the Wolves getting a new coach?
Not for a while.
Yeah, I wouldn't count on it.
Great. I'll just not tune in.
That's so funny.
I get enough from Twitter. That
Tibbs is entertainment.
He's a polarizing coach. I feel
also,
like.
the fastest coach to 100 wins ever, I believe. Did it with Chicago, but the point is, do you want another wager on the Wolves, or are we moving on?
I don't think we know enough about them about their situation to bet on their seeding.
For those unaware,
I think it's close enough that it's iffy enough that they'll even make the playoffs, to where that should be obviously entertaining on Monday.
For those unaware, at the beginning of the year, Ben and I made the ultimate wager on the Wolves this season, which kind of spawned the weekly wager segment.
Yes,
but we wagered on the Timberwolves make the playoffs this year. Ben took the Wolves make the playoffs. I took the Wolves miss in the playoffs. And the wager was if the Wolves make the playoffs, I have to eat some coleslaw.
Yes.
And if they miss the playoffs, Ben gets to eat a bowl of soup.
Yes.
So
next week.
Yeah,
we'll know.
It's kept us interested all year, and I know it sounds dumb, folks, but
no, hey, it's good. It's been a roller coaster thanks to the Wolves. Second half, thanks to the Wolves swoon.
We'll save this maybe for the quick off season that's approaching us, but we never hit that one food debate I wanted to bring up.
Yes.
So I guess we'll table that because we're running long here. Yeah. So finally on to jerseys.
Here to start the third period. What team is this? It's not Team USA. Well, yes, it is. They've got on new uniforms. They're wearing the logo of the Duck. I've never seen this before.
And the jersey of the week is kind of topical now because the first axe in the head coaching carousel has fallen. Which incredible. You think about it. The NHL had no head coaching changes during the season. The last time that happened was the first season of expansion in 67-68.
Wow.
Which is incredible. No coaching changes. And really, you think about it, the teams that were really bad, they had new head coaches this year,
weren't
like
gonna fire
Buffalo, Arizona, and you can't really fire them. So, but the New York Rangers, the jersey of the week, And the Rangers obviously firing Alain Vigneault following their season finale Saturday afternoon, the Philadelphia Flyers. Rangers going in a younger direction and obviously going with a new head coach and Alain
Probably
Vigneault
a good
on the
move
moves. Yeah,
for
somebody
AV too.
Somebody will scoop up Alain, especially like teams that are looking to like win now.
Yeah.
Because that's typically when Alain Vigneault wins in the window of his coaching period with a team is because he won the first years with New York, took them all the way to Stanley Cup final.
Right.
And I think it was roughly the same he did like with Vancouver.
Yeah.
Maybe it took him a year or two, but yeah. So I forget. I think it was Down Goes Brown said look for Calgary, maybe scoop him up. But
could be.
Anyway,
So
Jersey
you're
of the
familiar
week,
with it, yeah.
New York Rangers. What we're looking for is a third jersey next year. The New York Rangers have had some good looks throughout the years for a third jersey.
Mm-hmm.
What are you looking for? Because the Rangers, the home and road themselves, is a very good standalone look.
Yes.
And as Tom is bringing up here, their best third look.
Yeah.
But what are we realistically looking for?
It would be amazing if they went with anything in the Liberty direction. Like that would be.
Please, you can white and blue it too.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's the NHL and it's so good it's not going to happen kind of thing.
I mean, all you would change is the sleeves, right? You'd probably.
I mean,
I don't even know if I would change that.
Yeah, I mean the whole jersey as a whole was great. Like I really enjoyed the jersey. I have a youth-sized one at my house right now.
I like that there's a throwback Yager jersey because that's okay.
Yeah.
That works.
But I think, in all honesty, their third jersey, I don't know that they rush to do one because it's like they're not going to have a lot of people on that team that are going to be worth buying a jersey for a while. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see if they went, something kind of New York with it. We've seen them run the New York diagonal instead of Rangers.
Not terrible.
No,
it
it looked fine, and so that's a possibility. But I'd like to see them do something a little bit because I feel like they can. They're not so steeped with tradition like the Canadians or whatever, where they can't possibly do a third jersey that is a little off the cuff, like they did with the Liberty jersey. They could totally do that.
And
so
that's not gaudy. That was like
no. It was. I think it looked really good. It was really clean.
How many jerseys do you think max a team will have on their roster, like in 5 years? Do you think that you could have 5, 6, 7?
No.
Like jersey sets?
Yeah.
The NHL is super conservative with that.
The NHL.
I'd be shocked if it was more than
because I think if I was going to choose,
never get above 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think what you could do optimally is you could have the Liberty one that's a home and away, and then a New York one that's blue.
Yeah,
that's not white.
Yeah.
I think that would be good.
So you're constructing a jersey set that mirrors like what the Mighty Ducks did in the 90s.
Kind of, yeah.
Where they had the home the
and away
road, and then the
thirds.
alternate home and the alternate roads.
Yeah. I think as long as the Rangers avoid going all red, I think, which I don't think they'll do.
Can you imagine like a wild ask?
It'd be weird.
It
really
was
weird.
so bad.
Yeah. So I think as long as they stick with kind of the stuff that's worked for them, but at the same time, do something iconic. You're in New York City, you're actually welcome in New York City, unlike the other team that's there. Do something with it. I don't know.
It's like Jay-Z.
Yeah. But maybe the Empire State Building is involved. Maybe, the Liberty thing was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. Perfect for that time. Mike Richter's mask, I think, made it even more so than it was already. Gretzky wearing that jersey didn't hurt.
I love that idea so much.
But yeah, do something New York. Something very New York, but keep it simple at the same time. Don't put a cab on your jersey.
What
or
if they
anything,
just made the concept? Would you like to maybe do something with the concept of what they used in the mid 70s
with the shield on the front?
Yeah,
They could do that. It'd be tough to pull off.
Maybe
yeah, I know what you mean.
The Blazers.
It'd be tough to pull off. I feel like with doing the full shield in the front. I think they could. I don't know. It looks it looks goofy to me now, not having ever seen it. Really,
if you're going to do the shield, I think you go with the Liberty. But Liberty. You guys have any other opinions?
Well, I think what they'll actually probably do is they'll probably use their Winter Classic jersey from last year, or a design close to it.
Yeah.
I think it was a decent look, and you got the NY on the sleeves, and or, maybe they do something like that with the Shield NY in the front. But I have a problem seeing them go away from the either New York or Rangers going diagonally around the front. So I think that's what they.
Yeah, I think if you don't go Liberty, maybe you go something else like to that effect, where it's the Shield.
And I think they did wear them again this year. So
for the
because I know Buffalo wore their Winter Classic outside of the Winter Classic after. So yeah, I'm sure I think the Rangers did the same too. So I'm guessing that's what those two teams will probably roll with next year.
Sure.
So, all right, that'll do it. We can call it. This has been the regular season recap show. Like I said, we have a special playoff preview show, episode 147, where we break down the Minnesota Wild Winnipeg Jets playoff series. And you can find that, of course, on SoundCloud, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, along with this podcast as well. You can find this podcast also on a website called zonecoverage.com, which we all write for. And we have Twitter accounts. Man, did I really hit a wall right there.
At T-Schreier3.
We have Twitter accounts. Woo! Yes, at T-Schreier3, at Ben Remington, at Giles Farrell. Podcasts on Twitter at GATG Wild Podcast. Follow Zone Coverage on Twitter at Zone Coverage MN for all your Minnesota sports coverage. Do check out our playoff bracket challenge. We are going to do that here this week. Make sure you get your picks in and join our challenge. Hopefully I have some prizes for you to give away. With that said, that'll wrap up this show. Don't forget to check out the playoff episode again, and we will talk to you again later.
Later.
It's not resiliency. You're making it sound like we're good. That's all. I'm done.